We've all seen the news that the Nintendo Switch 2 has been announced and that we're getting a direct in April. That leaves a lot of time for speculation. It leaves a lot of time for people to make theories about launch games and potential pitfalls in the design and power level. Even though we know most of the hardware, or assume we know most of the hardware, we know nothing of the software, and we know nothing of the proprietary nature that comes with Nintendo consoles. But by that I mean, if you guys remember, a long time ago, we had this beautiful handheld, this amazing handheld, revolutionary before its time, PS Vita. I think the PS Vita was an amazing handheld, but it suffered a pretty big problem before modders got around to fixing it. When the PS Vita first came out, it used Sony-specific storage cards and Sony-specific game cards. Game cards, not a problem. All the games were compressed well enough that everything worked. That might be what we're looking at might be what we'll get around to it. But the memory cards were extremely expensive and proprietary. Unlike the Nintendo Switch, which now exists, that uses standard SD cards, and even something like the Legion Go, which also uses standard SD cards. For some reason, Sony went the route of trying to make their game cards and also their storage proprietary, leading to really high exorbitant prices for not a lot of memory, if I'm honest. And when I think about the future of handhelds, Nintendo's always leading that charge. I think my whole computer just jacked up for some. I think we're bad. Nintendo always leads that charge. Nintendo led it when it came to the Game Boy originally, and then moving us into the future with the Nintendo DS, and now the Switch. Now we're going to be getting the Switch 2, and currently, what I'm worried about is not the proprietary storage, because they are now using SD cards, which is good. But I'm worried about the proprietary nature of the Nintendo game card. Chat room, do you guys know how big a Nintendo game card is for the Nintendo Switch? Do you know how big they get up to? I have a Wikipedia article pulled up, so I can tell you right now. The Nintendo Switch game cards can range from 1 gigabyte all the way up to 32 gigabytes. Okay. Chat room, do you know how big modern AAA games are? I'm sure you can understand what I'm getting at here. The reason why I bring this up is because we've had certain ports of Nintendo games, of non-Nintendo games on the Nintendo Switch that either ran like ass or looked like ass because of the limitations of the game card. 32 gigabytes is not a lot of storage space for very big games. Hogwarts Legacy is a perfect example. Ran like shit and looked like shit on the Nintendo Switch. Sorry, Switch fans. It's just the truth. It's okay, because if the game ran and you got to play it and you're fine with your experience, that's fine. It's apparently only 15 gigabytes, 14.9 gigabytes according to the Nintendo Store, which is a webpage. And I think this is the exact same webpage that actually displays when you go to the Switch store on your Nintendo Switch. Holy shit, I hate Nintendo. Anyways, one of the heavier games, I agree. But one of the heavier games on the Nintendo Switch is Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, which is about 24 gigs, 23 gigs. Pretty big, right? Pretty big. Fortnite is also up there at about 21 gigabytes. So if you're looking to play some of these third-party crossplay games that are also getting kind of big, like a Call of Duty or a Fortnite or a potential Path of Exile 2, these games are too big for Nintendo Switch game cards without huge amounts of compression and making the games look bad. Now, this is the original Nintendo Switch we're talking about. Nintendo Switch game cards for the Nintendo Switch 2 could be bigger. My hope, personally, is that we move it up to 64 gigabytes and that they maybe decrease the cost of the cards for developers. Now, the reason why these cards even exist is as an anti-piracy measure, right? It's an easy way to keep Nintendo as Nintendo as possible. I don't know if I explained how Nintendo does things Nintendo enough. That's basically all it is, right? It's an anti-piracy measure probably, and some way to keep people in the ecosystem without being able to move things easily. we have the MIG switch or mag switch, whatever. So you can ROM dump, right? It doesn't really change anything. It just makes modding and getting to these things harder. It doesn't make them impossible. But no Nintendo, they'll keep it. 64 gigabytes. If you look at something like a recent game like a Call of Duty Black Ops 6. Now, the only reason why I mentioned Black Ops 6 is because the Nintendo Switch 2 is supposed to be maybe targeting around base PS4 levels of performance. I'm not saying that Black Ops 6 ran good on the base PS4. I'm saying it came out on the base PS4. Okay? So before we start throwing out slurs and calling people names, just know that that doesn't hurt my feelings. But I'm only bringing it up because it exists on the platform. And the total size of the PS4 version of Black Ops 6 is 40 gigabytes, including both campaign packs, because there's 2 different campaign packs, and multiplayer. All 3 together, with all the textures, with all the shaders, is 39.5 gigabytes of space. While when you look at something like the PC version and the PS5 and Xbox versions, it's over 100 gigabytes. So a lot of this compression work has been done for the last generation of consoles. What you'd be asking now is for developers to do that work for games that are going to be coming out in 2025 that existed already in a previous generation, right? Or at the beginning stages of this generation, rather. Something like Remnant 2 is a 70 gigabyte game. I think it could be compressed down because Remnant 1 was on the Switch 1. Remnant 2 was not. I think it could be compressed down reasonably to 60 gigabytes, 64 gigabytes for the Switch 2. Another game that could potentially see a Switch release that I think people would like to play on the Nintendo Switch is something like Rivals of Aether 2. I don't think the game is all that big, to be fair. But if it's too big, then once again, 64 gigabytes is more than enough space for a game like that to exist on the Nintendo Switch 2. Tekken 8, Street Fighter 6. These games are either slightly over 60 gigabytes. I think Street Fighter is like 70 gigs and Tekken is like 100. But I think targeting PS4 level hardware and compressing textures, compressing sounds, making less background noise, right? Taking away objects in the background or making the shaders and textures on those smaller instead of making them 4K textures, make them 720p or 1080p textures. That might be able to bring games down to the level of a 64 gigabyte cartridge. I don't think that's ever at all possible for most of these current modern games on a 32 gigabyte cartridge. And that's my worry with the Nintendo Switch 2, is I don't want it to be seen as a last hope or a bastion of modern physical media when truly what you're getting is a cartridge that has part of the game on it and you have to download the rest, making it so that it's not physical because it's just the license key basically and like the very bare bones of the game. It is not playable directly on cartridge. That's what I don't want to see from the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, you could usually just leave first party releases as game cartridges and then make almost everything else third party. But that leads us to the problem where if the Nintendo Switch 2 is 256 gigabytes, like the leaks would suggest, if they don't do good compression work, a game like Call of Duty is not going to be 40 gigs. It's going to be 100. A game like Tekken 8 is going to be 100 gigs. A game like Street Fighter 6 is going to be 70 gigs. How much can you really fit? How many big AAA games can you really fit on 256 gigabytes? I'll tell you, not many. I used to have a computer that had a 256 gigabyte SSD, and I had to immediately buy a 2 terabyte hard drive, or I think it was an SSD, because I put like 3 games in that bitch and it was full. So I moved all my games over to a 2 terabyte SSD. It's currently in this computer right now. It's in the laptop that I use, and I have not filled up this 2 terabyte SSD, and I have a lot of games, but it would be pretty easy to do with something like 256 gigabyte with a quarter of a terabyte. I don't want the Nintendo Switch 2 to basically be the game cards to basically be glorified license keys that you're paying for. Something like Concord or Battleborn, how if these old games or these live service games get shut down or get portions of them shut down, you no longer have access to it, even though you have the physical media that exists saying that you own it. Well, how are you gonna play your Concord now? I can't play my Battleborn anymore. I sold the disc because I couldn't play it. A collector wanted it because he wanted dead games. I don't know, man. Anyways, I'm hoping to see good third-party support for the Nintendo Switch 2. For those people who only buy one console and don't have a PC, I could understand and support them getting third-party support. Now, hopefully the third-party support is better than it was on the Nintendo Switch 1, because the Nintendo Switch 1 was significantly more anemic hardware. If we're looking at power level equivalent to a base PS4, we're looking at something along the lines of like almost a GTX like 1630, a 1050 Ti. Those are cards that some modern games still play on now. You're not going to play a Black Myth Wukong at fucking 1080p. You're going to play it at 720p with FSR Ultra fucking performance on. But that bitch is going to run at 30 FPS. So I think there are a lot of games that could see the light of day on Nintendo Switch 2 if we have enough storage, or if compression is done well enough that these games fit on bigger game cards than we currently have, because 32 gigabytes is not enough, but 64 just might be. Go look at some of your favorite current modern AAA games, if you like any, because if I'm honest, most of them are pretty bad. Outside of Space Marine 2, let's fucking go Space Marine 2! Go Helldivers 2 as well. Go look at your favorite modern AAA games and look at how much space they take up. And now ask yourself if you think that currently, with the way Nintendo Switch game cards work, they will ever be able to fit on the current Nintendo Switch 32 gigabyte maximum game card. Come back to me with an answer. Leave it in the comment section down below. Like the video. Tell me how you feel about the potential of the bottleneck of the game cards being something that holds the Nintendo Switch 2 back from good third-party support. 256 gigabytes of rumored storage for the Nintendo Switch 2 possibly not being enough for some of these very big titles. Leave it all in the comment section down below. Like the video. Subscribe to the channel. We're going to be talking about the Nintendo Switch 2 a lot up until launch. I'll probably get it right on launch. I want it. The wife wants it. Fuck it. We'll get it. Anyways, this has been Beanie Thuggish yapping about the potential pitfalls of the Nintendo Switch 2 before launch, before the April 2nd Direct. Signing out and saying,